our theme this year for TEDx is triumphs and tragedies. And we have about 10 or 12 participants that earned the opportunity to be here because they presented in front of their peers, which may sometimes even be harder than presenting in front of adults they don't know. And out of all of their peers, they were the ones that their teachers felt had the best presentation. Okay, so we're going to begin today with Olivia Cherry. Is she here? She's here. Oh, she's getting mic'd up. Perfect. Okay, let me find her speech. I'm not going to tell you what their speeches are about because that's the excitement. So, no titles. Okay, this is yours. Do you need this? Or do I use this?
They use that.
I use that.
If they want
Okay.
to switch, yes.
Just switch slides.
And you just gotta point to the computer.
Did they use the middle one or the right? Use the right and then go to the next.
Hold on one second. Hold on.
Oops, sorry.
And then you just click this. You don't have to use it.
Hi, my name is Olivia Cherry, and today I'll be talking about blood flow. Imagine visiting India, coming for the yoga, many festivals, or for the culture. But hidden behind all that is a tragedy. This tragedy is blood farming. Blood farming is when people are held captive, not given enough food, and their blood gets extracted from them multiple times a month. Blood farming is very devastating for the people of India because it's very harming and it's very illegal. Blood farming is very harmful to people in many ways. Like it can kill and can also kill people's bodies. This is because for your body to function, you need blood. Blood is an essential for your health because your body pretty much depends on a good amount of oxygen for its billion cells, and it brings nourishment to the muscular wall through the vessels. But not everyone able to survive. So people extracting blood many times a month is very harmful. The website bbc.com states, it was actually like a dairy system, Dixon. These people are caged, not given enough food, and their blood got extracted from them multiple times a month. These people, getting your blood extracted from you 16 times a month is very harming, unsafe, and unhealthy. But this is more than how many times a cow gets milked a week. Kids are dying and getting HIV, human immunodeficiency viruses. This can attack the immune system, this can lead to AIDS, and untreated can reduce certain cells, making it easier to catch infections. The website bbc.com states, in 2013, 2,000 children died and 21 others got diagnosed with HIV after a single unlicensed blood bank was found to be transfusing patients. After a single unlicensed blood bank was found to be transfusing patients. Reported the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics. This shows how bad blood farming is to people. Blood farming is illegal because of how harming it is. It is like selling guns and drugs on the black market, but instead you are selling blood and organs on the red market. The website www.medicalbag.com states there's actually like a states. Whereas black market trade in illegal goods like guns and drugs, the red market, the journalist Scott Carney says in his new book, trades in human flesh, kidneys, and other organs, in human corneas, blood, bones, and eggs. These products are meant to help your body function the correct way, not to be sold at any time, any place, or to anyone. The website bbc.com. The website www.medicalbag.com states, this highly illegal and immoral practice involves treating humans, being often recent immigrants from other marginalized populations, much like cattle on an industrial dairy farm. So people that are doing this are from other or from different populations. People are still doing this, and it's very, very illegal. With what has been shared with you today, my only hope is that others are more aware and agree that there are more risks versus benefits when it comes to blood from for the people of India. At the end of the day, no one should live in fear that they're going to be taken, have their blood extracted from them against their will, putting their lives and other people's lives in danger.
Thank you. Okay. Our next contestant, speaker, I should say speaker, it's not a contestant, sorry. Our next speaker is Abby Menard. It won't click because it's in a PDF, so I'll just stay short. This top screen. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. There you go.
So I press this to click?
No, that's not.
Okay.
Okay, just
Okay.
make sure that it's pointing to the.
Okay, so Abby Menard.
Would you risk your life for the world? For what you thought was right? Even if you knew that there's a very large chance you'd be caught, and if you were, it would lead to your death? This describes the German nonviolent anti-Nazi group, the Weiße Rose, translated to the White Rose. The Weiße Rose was formed by a group of college students. These students were Sophie Scholl, Hans Scholl, Christoph Probst, Willy Graf, and Alexander Schmorl. The Weiße Rose members were brave enough to pass out leaflets consisting of information against Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, hoping to encourage others to stand with the White Rose, knowing it may cost them their life, only to save millions of others. Through the years, history has shown us triumph, but not without great tragedy. As many know, anyone who would speak out against Hitler was very brave. These people include the Weiße Rose members. When the group started in 1942, members would mail the leaflets to certain people. However, by early 1943, they were scattering leaflets by hand. This can be extremely dangerous. This is because it raises suspicion of who's writing against Hitler. The Weiße Rose members would also take these leaflets to other cities, which also carried a great risk. Military police constantly patrolled the area while demanding identification papers of any male of military service age. The Weiße Rose members may have been fearful of the consequences from what they were doing, but they knew it was for the greater good. The hope that the world would one day be united was enough to overpower the fear of death. The Weiße Rose knew that they couldn't stop innocent people from being killed for their differences in beliefs alone, so they tried to convince convince others to stand with them in the fight against Hitler and the Nazis. On their first leaflet, the Weiße Rose wrote, "It is certain that today every honest German is ashamed of his government. Who among us has any conception of the dimensions of shame that will befall us and our children when one day the veil has fallen from our eyes, and the most horrible of crimes, crimes that infinitely outdistance every human measure, reach the light of day?" The White Rose felt very strong about what they were doing. They directed their fifth leaflet towards the Germans. "Germans, do you and your children wish to suffer the same fate as the Jews? Do you wish to be measured with the same measure as your seducers? Shall we be the most hated and rejected nation in the world? No. Therefore, separate yourselves from the National Socialist subhumanity. Prove with your deeds that you think differently. A new war of independence is beginning. The better part of the nation is fighting with us. Rend the cloaks of apathy that you have wrapped around your hearts. Make up your minds before it is too late." The Weiße Rose knew that they had to stop Hitler and the Nazis, which required help from the greater good. In the end, Hans and Sophie Scholl were found throwing their sixth leaflet from one of their college classrooms. They were arrested and interrogated. Christoph Probst was later interrogated as well, the seventh leaflet in his pocket. He tried to swallow it, but it was too late. On February 22nd, 1943, the Scholls and Probst were quickly tried. On that same day, they were beheaded. Later on, the other members of the Weiße Rose were also killed, but not soon enough. They had already gotten their message out. It was not okay for people who were different to be tortured and killed. To Germany and the world, they have encouraged so many people in many ways, all following the message of take a stand for things that you know are wrong. Their life ended in tragedy, but the world triumphed over Hitler's fall. They knew that they had a very small chance of surviving from what they did. And they had to encourage others to help defeat Hitler, which was exactly what they did. So we thank them. In the last words of the Weiße Rose, "Lang lebe die Freiheit." Long live freedom.
Our next speaker is Taylor Castles, sorry, Taylor Castles. There you go. This one progresses forward, okay? And if you go too far, squeeze back one. There we go. I'm gonna test it and see.
Testing.
No, it doesn't turn up.
Hello?
I don't hear volume coming out.
Testing. Testing.
Imagine soaring through the sky, seeing everything and everyone below you. It might be a scary experience for some people, but for Amelia Earhart, it was a dream that would soon come true. Amelia Earhart was a female pilot who impressed everyone she met with her competitive spirit and brave personality. She knew flying was her passion the second she took off in a plane. Amelia Earhart is an excellent example of triumph and tragedy throughout her life. Her triumphs of breaking world records and tragedy showed an inspiring person she was. The triumphs of Amelia Earhart are not just that she broke records, but also that people started to believe in her. She was persistent in achieving everything she deemed possible in her mind, states an article on womenshistory.org. She knew she could do anything, including helping and encouraging others. Before she was noticed as an amazing pilot, she founded a club called the 90 Women's. It was an organization of female aviators. It inspired many women to follow their dreams, because being a woman in her time meant that women were not respected as much as men. So when she flew, no one seemed to care, until she broke records. With her first plane ride in 1920, she realized her true passion and began flying lessons. According to Samantha Weems, the author of an article on Amelia Earhart. This is the part that changed her life forever. Going from a talented but unnoticed young woman to a world record breaker known around the country was truly inspiring. Her first ever record was when she was the first woman to fly higher than 14,000 feet, which was the previous record. She broke another when she flew across the Atlantic solo. After that, she broke many more records, until her last flight. With the topic of triumph and tragedy, I picked someone who represented both. At the time, being both a woman and a pilot meant being met with obstacles. Even her own family discouraged her from learning. Just like her family, everyone would try to get in her head. Being a pilot is not something a woman should do, not all the people around her. She did everything she could to ignore them and the things they said. This was her passion and dream. She would let nothing stop her. But when she was attempting to break a record of flying all the way around the world, her plane went missing, and it remained a mystery. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart is a puzzle the world hasn't solved for the last 81 years, says an article on interestingengineering.com. People don't know exactly what happened. They think her plane didn't crash in the water. Her radio still worked for a week. Even though she didn't come back from her journey, she's still considered to be extremely brave and courageous. She went on the trip, even though she knew the risks and dangers that could occur. Amelia Earhart is a strong and brave woman who is an excellent example for both triumph and tragedy. Everything she went through never stopped her legacy from living on. That legacy, never give up on your dreams, no matter what anyone else tells you, and prove that women can do anything, as long as they think that in their own mind. As Amelia Earhart once said, everyone has oceans to fly, if they have the heart to do it. Is it reckless? Maybe. But what do dreams know of boundaries?
Our next speaker is Chloe Daniels, and then this is what progresses your screen forward. I need to go to the back. Right. Sorry about that.
Wilma Rudolph. She was one of the many sad children who suffered from polio, but even after the doctors told her multiple times that she would never walk again, she believed in herself and never gave up. In Wilma Rudolph's life, she was faced with a devastating tragedy, she learned how to overcome it, and eventually she left a long-lasting legacy of triumph. She became an Olympic champion for her talent in running and inspired many people across the world. June 23, 1940 in St. Bethlehem, Tennessee. She was the 20th out of 22 children. As a child, she suffered from polio, double pneumonia, and scarlet fever. As a result of polio, she was forced to wear metal braces on her left leg at the age of 6. Most doctors told her she would never walk again since her leg was paralyzed, but she kept trying. According to ESPN.com, her brothers and sisters took turns massaging her crippled leg every day. This exemplifies how Wilma Rudolph was surrounded by a caring and loving family when she was in pain. During this time, Wilma Rudolph slowly lost hope in recovery. This is illustrated on the website notablebiographies.com. It states, Rudolph's confidence may have flagged at times in her childhood when it seemed she might spend a lifetime in leg braces or even a wheelchair. But even those negative thoughts did not stop her from trying to achieve her goal. Throughout her recovery, she suffered from measles, chickenpox, and whooping cough. Soon after, she began hopping and walking around with her leg brace. At the age of 11, she was caught playing basketball outside. She took off her leg brace and began exercising. This is explained on the website olympic.org. It says, by the time she was 12, she had regained her ability to walk and took up athletics. She started to play basketball at her high school and really enjoyed it. Then she realized she had a talent in track. She joined the high school track team and instantly loved it. She was so good at running that she went to the Olympics at the age of 16. The website womenshistory.org reveals how she competed in the 1956 Olympic Games and won a bronze medal in the 4x100 relay. She then won more medals, leading to the start of her career in running. As she got farther in her career, she became very well known and successful. The website womenshistory.org mentions how Wilma Rudolph won 3 gold medals and broke at least 3 world records. She began inspiring people all over the world because of her encouraging story. Wilma Rudolph joined the U.S. track team and won multiple medals. The website biography.com states, following the games, Rudolph made numerous appearances on television and received several honors, including the Associated Press Female Athlete of the Year Award in both 1960 and 1961. This conveys how Wilma Rudolph had already won many awards and medals at only the age of 20. Wilma Rudolph had finally reached her lifelong goals and wasn't going to let them go. In conclusion, Wilma Rudolph was a very inspirational and important person. She suffered from multiple traumatic illnesses, she learned how to defeat them, and ultimately left a permanent legacy of triumph. Even after her retirement in 1963, she became an athletic teacher to share the joy of running. On November 12, 1994, she died from brain cancer. Her life was now over, but her encouraging legacy was still very much alive. And as she herself once said, the triumph can't be had without the struggle. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Isabel Ramos.
Death, power, jealousy, and beyond. What do these simple words have in common with each other? Tragedy. That's right. These events and feelings tell a tale of some sort of suffering. To the present-day person, tragic occasions are something no joy can be found in. But for the Greek people of 5th century BCE, the telling of these dreadful stories led to great triumph in their religious practices, the legacies and careers of the playwrights, and the great theater culture of today. During the time of Greek tragedy theater, the people would believe that there were gods and goddesses. People would gather at religious festivals to worship, for example, the god of Dionysiac, as said by Mark Cartwright in his article on ancient.eu. The plays of Greek tragedy would be used to further enhance the ceremonies with themes of abuse, love, and fraught relationships between men and the depicted gods, which often led to the sacrificing of goats. These innovative messages brought more levels of fun and intellect to the festivals, when fellow worshippers would watch before their own eyes the gods showing justice and power to foolish mankind. In addition, according to chromeboy.wordpress.com, the Greek tragedy of Antigone, Creon, whose judgment may have been intentionally clouded by the gods, has learned a hard moral lesson, as did the rest of the audience in this play. In this play, the audience was able to see how, because of the gods, the tragic character was able to learn something that will stick with them for the rest of his life. The creator of these plays, at the time of their glory, got to collect awards and share their passionate writing for the people of Greece. But now, they are known for their legacy of using sadness to help people deal with their own. Sophocles won perhaps as many as 24 victories, compared to 13 for Aeschylus and 4 for Euripides, stated by the authors Thomas M. Woodward and Oliver Taplin of the article Sophocles, Greek Drama List. The true genius of the twisted-natured narratives that these people created was acknowledged and now made into careers. These writers can be known for their clever use today of tragedy to get people to talk about things that trouble them and heal, as said on smithsonianmag.org. A director of the Brooklyn-based Theater of War Productions uses old sad stories of playwrights' ideas long ago to help people of traumatic backgrounds, like veterans, their families, caregivers, and communities. By spawning these award-winning, depressing pieces of theater that are used to bring up past experiences in society's present-day soul and work through them, the original tragedians leave a legacy of fame and good fortune. Lastly, these stories of ruined lives, love, and loss were the start of a triumphant art of acting, costumes, and sets that is theater today. It says in ect.ancient.eu how Greek theater tragedies were originally founded by Thespis and he and his storytelling. This culture of people who found joy in a community of actors and actresses was all because of the tragedy in another make-believe world created in Thespis' mind. Also, today, the original formula for a Greek tragedy hero can be found used in many shows ahead of its 5th century BCE time. In the Poetics book by Aristotle, it shows how for every tragedy told, there is some kind of tragic hero. This character was always constructed with a high status in wealth or popularity, so they have a high place to fall from, something to lose. A special quality, something that sets them apart from everyone else. A tragic quality, the thing that leads to their downfall. And a new understanding or lesson they've gotten from their life and the sadness. So it sets the story apart from showing no growth. This pattern pulled by Aristotle can be found in many of Shakespeare's plays, who is decades after the Greek tragedy era. But one show that easily has a character who identifies with this formula is the musical Spring Awakening with its main character, Melchior Gabor. His mind goes through setbacks when he is wrong about how he knew to control himself mentally and physically, and what he thought was right and wrong for him in his own life. When his friend dies of suicide and he is careless with his first love, where she is ultimately destroyed by his decisions and actions, he is left to learn from his mistakes with them and tell their stories to make other people aware of what could happen if they follow in his footsteps. Greek tragic theater is the perfect embodiment of triumph and tragedy. I mean, hello, it's in the name. It used the sad overcoming stories to help religious worship, the careers and legacy of the playwrights, and start the future theater culture. The power that redemption has on an audience can make them connect to the characters, because like us, they learn from mistakes and have triumph through the faults that make us human. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Gabriela Zambano.
In 1981, the the first official government report on AIDS in the United States was released. And that year, there were 241 known deaths. The death rate steadily increased for over a decade, and by 1995, the death rate in the United States alone had reached 50,000. Those with the disease were kicked out by family, or would be forced to eat off separate plates and not touch any family member. People were terrified and had no idea how it was spread. All they knew was the diagnosis was a death sentence. Someone who was HIV positive wasn't expected to live more than another 6 months, and treatment was expensive, experimental, and few and far between. The stereotypes and stigmas relating to AIDS are responsible for the severity of the AIDS crisis in the United States, and the severity of AIDS now. Stigmas were present from the first signs of the disease. In the beginning of the disease's history, it was medically referred to as GRID, or game-related immune deficiency. It was renamed AIDS, or acquired immune deficiency syndrome, in 1981, but was still regularly referred to as GRID for at least another 2 years. In the media or by others, AIDS is commonly referred to as the gay cancer, or gay plague. Religious leaders would refuse to hold services for the deceased, and many funerals were held in gay bars. At the same time, the LGBT community was growing stronger by the day. Rallies and protests had unimaginable effects on the progression of research and the strength of the community. As Gabriel Garcia Marquez wrote in Love in the Time of Cholera, love was always love, any time, any place, but was more solid the closer it came to death. The same-sex sexual activity wasn't decriminalized in the United States until 2003. It was decriminalized in New York, one of the states hit hardest by the AIDS crisis, in 1980, just a year before the first government report on AIDS. This only further contributed to stigma. Right after homosexuality was decriminalized, a disease that appeared to only be found in gay men appeared. This later presented to be incorrect. HIV is not medically tied to homosexuality in any way, when hemophiliacs, women, and infants had contracted the disease. In the beginning especially, many were pronounced dead from other causes to save the family from stigma, and many, upon diagnosis, went down as a suicide statistic instead. HIV patients still have higher suicide rates than those who are HIV negative. Of course, there's a reason these stigmas still exist. Many take a homophobic stance and still argue that HIV and AIDS are God's punishment for homosexuality. It's also been argued that at the time of the AIDS crisis, the government just didn't know how to handle such an epidemic. After all, now, the US President's emergency plan for AIDS relief represents the largest commitment to any single disease in history. And while this may be the current status, this certainly hasn't always been the case. In press conferences, the President's press secretary joked about the disease, and Ronald Reagan didn't say the phrase AIDS publicly until 1985, 4 years after the AIDS epidemic started. Zidovudine, or AZT, the first approved drug for HIV, wasn't approved until 1987, and was approved after only 1 trial on humans instead of the usual 3. Even in the beginning, there was a clear high-risk group. The HIV patients and AIDS was commonly associated with only gay men and drug addicts. Vito Rosso said in a speech for ACT UP, "If I'm dying from anything, I'm dying from the fact that not enough rich, white, heterosexual men have gotten AIDS for anyone to care." HIV and AIDS were deemed gay diseases, and so the government turned their back to patients. These stigmas placed on AIDS had taken thousands of lives yearly. For the first time in history, though, LGBT people were standing up for their human rights. The whole country was listening. It took a tragedy to be heard, but they couldn't be ignored any longer. Even still, the United States has unproportionately high rates of HIV diagnoses. The death rate is about 15,000 per year, and in the next year, 40,000 people will be diagnosed with HIV. 30,000 of these will be of gay men. Stigmas are still causing difficulty for HIV-positive people. There are currently no nationwide laws against discrimination based on sexuality, and gay men who have been sexually active in the past 12 months can't give blood, regardless of HIV status. Housing can be denied to a gay person if it's claimed that the attendant will give AIDS to the other attendants. Medication for HIV is still extremely expensive, and there is no cure. All this said, it's crucial to not forget where it started and where HIV stigmas and stereotypes have progressed since then. Now, HIV and AIDS are both classified as manageable, and someone who is HIV positive is expected to live as long, if not equally as long, as someone who's not. Stereotypes and stigmas are still present, but the sooner these are overcome, the closer we get to making HIV a disease of the past. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sahil Vaswani.
The Washington Post states that over 223,000 students have experienced gun violence at school since 1999's Columbine High School massacre. The most recent school shooting massacre was at Parkland, Florida, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. A 19-year-old ex-student, Nicholas Cruz, shot and killed 17 students and staff and injuring 17 others. The Parkland shooting was a terrible tragedy which brought people together and resulted in creating new laws to prevent another event like this from happening. According to CNN.com, Cruz obtained the guns he used during the school shooting legally. He passed the background checks to get his AR-15 rifle. Nicholas Cruz's mental health wasn't correct that led him to commit such a violent act. In a graphic video, he evilly laughed and said, quote, "Today, the massacre. All of this begins. All of the kids in the school will run in fear and hide. From the wrath of my power, they will know who I am. My life is meaningless. When you see me on the news, you'll know who I am." No sane person would say this. Many people say that gun control is not the solution to prevent school shootings. Others say that staff should have guns to protect the school in case of an emergency. CNN states in the survey that students seem unsafe in school with any firearm being on campus other than an SRO. However, after the massacre, people came together and certain Florida laws were passed in order to prevent another massacre. According to AJC.com, the minimum age to purchase a gun was raised from 18 to 21. The waiting period to get a gun is now 3 days for a background check, and banning mental disabled people from owning a firearm. In my opinion, we are taking the correct steps, but it looks like it's going to be a long road down before we can stop all these shootings. Additionally, there should be added security protections around all schools, including fencing, metal detectors, and alarms. Others say guns should be more accessible to people because it can cause quick action and prevent an intruder from committing an attack. While some may say this, having more guns can bring more violence, as kids can have more access to guns. To recap, since the Parkland shooting, there has been laws and actions made to prevent another massacre. Do you think you're safe? Do you think children across the U.S. are safe? What would you do if you find yourself in this situation? If you see something, say something. Then if you don't take action, it will be too late.
Our next speaker is Jana Kidd.
Good morning. I'm Jana, obviously. Today I have something a little different for you. I have a video to show you about somebody called Mozart. Don't know if you heard of him. Not really a popular person. I don't know about it. He played the piano kind of good. I'm a little better, but it's an opinion. It's fine. Today I'm going to be talking about something called the Mozart effect. I know you probably haven't heard of that, so watch the video, which I like to call informational. You'll know by the end. And I hope you enjoy.
Music is the soul of a rapper, the passion of a singer, the drive of a musician. It's what keeps some people breathing, and it's the backbone of those cultures. You could be driving the car one day listening to your favorite bop without a care in the world, simply because of the song you're listening to. You could be jamming out to your new favorite rock piece on the way home from school. Or you could be listening to the sweet sound that is God. In the end, no matter what music you listen to, it is likely music is important to you, as it is to all people. As said by Wharton University marketing professor Gideon Nave, when people are given the task of getting to know each other, music is one of the first things they tend to talk about. In an article done by Wharton interviewing Nave, he says the type of music one listens to can show a lot about them. Though that is interesting, we're going to be talking about something a bit different today. The Mozart effect. It's a theory that's been around for a while now. But what is it exactly? The Mozart effect is the theory that listening to classical music, such as Beethoven, will actually make you smarter. A course titled Music in the Brain, taught by USF professors neuroscientist Kiminobu Sugeya and world-renowned violinist Ayako Yanatani, discusses how listening to music not only enhances cognitive and motor skills, spatial temporal learning and neurogenesis, which is the brain's ability to produce neurons, but also helps to relieve stress or reduce pain or symptoms of depression. Usually, Alzheimer's patients are unresponsive, but once you start playing their favorite piece of music, their eyes light up, and they start moving, sometimes singing. This can have an effect on them for 10 minutes or more, they found in the study. To understand music, you need to know how hearing works and how sound connects to the brain. Here's some quick information. Binaural hearing is when you hear through both ears. Dyadic hearing is when both ears receive the same input. The Journal of Neuroscience conducted a study with this information. In this study, sound was presented dyadically to musicians. The results were that musicians had faster neural timing and greater inertial responses. The JNS reports that this study showed musicians have better speech and noise perception than non-musicians. Playing piano does have many benefits, but I can hardly say I've experienced this one. Huh? What does this prove? Does it really mean anything? Sure, musicians can hear better, but what does that mean in relation to thinking? Well, they don't just hear better. The corpus callosum is a part of the brain used to allow the left and right hemispheres to communicate, which allocates coordinated body movement and complex thoughts in logic, left side, and intuition, right side. A musician wants to have these sides communicate with one another, as this permits pianists to translate notes on sheet music to the keys their fingers hit on a piano to produce music. I can say that you do need to adjust to playing with both hands. It's a skill I struggled with when I first started, and even now as an intermediate player I still struggle with it sometimes. Another example would be the frontal lobe, a part of the brain that's used in decision making or planning/thinking, through which can be enhanced by listening to music. And lastly, the hippocampus, which produces and retrieves memories. Listening to music can further develop one's memory. That's why Alzheimer's patients can sometimes be momentarily cured of symptoms when listening to music. But does it have to be Mozart, or classical for that matter? For a while, researchers believed that classical music increased brain activity and made its listeners smarter, a phenomenon called the Mozart effect. Not necessarily true, says Sudaya Notani, University of Central Florida. Music in the brain. What happens when you're listening to music? Studies show that different parts of the brain light up when one listens to music they heard when growing up. So, for those that are curious as to whether listening to Mozart makes you smarter, here's your answer. Yes and no. It has been proven that one listening to Mozart for a period of time can respond faster to complicated puzzles, but it has also been proven that just about any music can enhance somebody's ability. This picture shows all the different effects any type of music can have on one person. Picture courtesy of the University of Central Florida. What does this all mean? Well, to put it simply, listen to whatever you like. Whether it's hard rock or classical, it doesn't matter. It's what makes you, you, and you should be proud of what you like. Listening to Mozart can help you develop mentally, but so can your favorite piece of rock music, just in a different way.
Darn, sorry, you don't get to see that. And that's all.
Okay, that's our last speaker for the morning. And our judges are going to adjourn for a few moments to discuss what they saw and come up with a finalist. The finalist that's chosen will be moving on to represent Charles S. Ritchie Middle School at our district TEDx competition at River Ridge Middle